Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for TMC Connect. I'm Tony Bramley. I'm the Business Development Coordinator here at TMC. And with us today, we have John Benavente as well as Ron DeFreitas, and they are with 5X Solutions, one of the very first preferred partners in the Preferred Partner Network for TMC. So thank you so very much for your valued partnership. Love you guys and can't wait to hear what you have to say. I know that this is an exciting topic because who doesn't love manual reporting, right? Everybody just really, really loves doing it manually. So you're going to show us how to eliminate it forever, how to get the most out of your business intelligence platform. Would like to remind everyone that you have entered on mute, but we do want this to be interactive. So if you do have a question, please drop it in the chat or the Q&A, and I will read those out for our discussion leaders. And there will be a follow-up email that comes out tomorrow. It'll have a link to the YouTube recording for this session, as well as information on 5X Solutions. So you can reach out directly to John or to Ron if you have additional questions. And with that, I will turn it over to our illustrious discussion leaders. That's easy for me to say. And you guys take it away.
Thanks, Tony. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Benavente, and Ron DeFreitas, my co-founder and partner, is here with us today as well. And as Tony mentioned, we're going to talk to you today about eliminating your manual reporting forever. And just a quick bit about the two of us. We've been around the mortgage business for 30 years with both technical and domain expertise. So we really understand what you guys do day to day. We understand the challenges that you have. In fact, we're going to talk about a few of those pain points that we all have experienced. And let's just jump right in. So the first one here, the problem that we see happen a lot with related to reports is there's just too many manual reports, and it takes too much time to do them. You can see here illustrated is this, what we call our infamous wall of numbers. And spreadsheets can just be obnoxious. You know, while they're a great canvas for performing a quick study of small sampling of data, they're not very user-friendly or trustworthy when looking at, continuing computing of reports. So we want to try to get away from this at some point. Many of you have probably done this before. You sat down to create a spreadsheet and it just grew. It started with a simple thing that you wanted to do, and you said, it'd be great if I add to that is maybe this next thing, and then, oh, wait a minute, I want to add one more thing. And as you go along, you keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And that's what creates this problem. Frankly, many people that do this can't remember the business rules that they put into the spreadsheet. And when you look at it, maybe you just look at it monthly, it takes time for you to go back and kind of reacquaint yourself with it, which takes away some of the efficiency of it. And that was the whole point in doing it in the first place. So what we see in our practice is that the managers in a mortgage business spend about 20% of their time aggregating data and putting it into spreadsheets and trying to mash it up so that they can create these reports. And that's just really a waste when you think about the amount of time that people spend with, especially with the level that they're working at. Now, I have to confess that that sample that you're looking at, that teeny little Excel spreadsheet sample that you're looking at, is actually a real spreadsheet that I created. And it's kind of gotten away from me a little bit, but something I use monthly to do some computing for a particular client. It was a genesis of a much larger report. Thank God we do a lot of these things in an automated fashion, so I don't have to deal with the manual updates of that.
Yeah, and imagine how much more complex it becomes when people are collaborating on the same spreadsheet and a change is made and some dependency winds up creating problems further down the line, down the road. So I think that's an important consideration as well.
Yeah, so the second thing that we see happen quite a bit And it's another thing we're trying to eliminate is this notion of internal emails. We see clients that have, hundreds, if not thousands of emails going all over the company on a daily basis. And, it's kind of funny. It even happens in our company sometimes. We ask each other the question, did you get my email? It has all the information in it, right? I mean, Ron, you probably do that to me every once in a while, and I'm sure I do the same thing to you.
Did I wind up in your spam box? I don't know what happened. But
I probably just missed it while I was having my coffee. But this sample that you see here is an actual sample, and I pulled some data out of it to protect the innocent. But this sample that I'm showing you right now is basically some simple banter around a piece of information related to an appraisal. Now, I'm sure all of you have experienced this before, where you're trying to figure out internally what's the best way to share data. So going back to the issue of reporting, we kind of want to underscore this is really a data issue at the end of the day, because information and data are really the same thing. If you can render it in a way where people can get at it easily, you can solve for a lot of these problems. The next thing that we want to look at as a real vulnerability to your business is any of you, especially at the C level in the corporation, being dependent on one person for your reporting needs. And you can see by these little snippets that you can see on the screen right here that this is kind of funny in a way, but the truth be told is I've worked with companies before where we've got a key person in the business who's performing some really high level tasks, and they leave. They just decide they're going to go somewhere else for whatever reason, and panic sets in. So imagine in this case where these people who are dependent on this person to do all this reporting, what if that person who's doing that reporting says, hey, guess what? I won the lottery and I'm leaving tomorrow. What do we do? Well, yeah, they probably would call Ron and I and we'd help them out there, but you'd have a panic if you didn't have a way to have somebody easily step in. And if we think about it back to the spreadsheet example that we showed you earlier, imagine you're getting a hold of somebody's spreadsheet and you have no idea how all those cells are connected or worksheets or however deep it goes, and you've got to decipher that. It can cause a huge disruption in your business. It certainly gives you a level of insecurity and makes you feel very vulnerable. So going to a fully automated reporting approach can really solve for that. And so if you think about the three things that we just talked about, what's the simple way to eliminate all of that vulnerability and pain? I'm sure you could probably have guessed what we would recommend, and that is automation. So automation, you shouldn't be fearful of it. You should really embrace it as a company. I know there's a lot of questions that you probably have about automating things like, where is my data stored? Is it going to be easily accessible? What format is it in? Do I need to hire a programmer? Does the data reside in different systems? How much effort do I want to put into this project, both money and time? Is this hard to do? Will it take long? And we get this all the time, like, how long will it take for you guys to get this thing, queued up so we can actually use this automation that you keep talking about? Is it expensive? What are implementation fees? And then the last and final question you probably would have to compare this to is it cheaper just to grind out these reports, the way you're doing it now, in a fairly manual way, even if you're pulling from some of your systems? So let's kind of delve into that a little bit and see if we can talk about where would you begin. From our side of the equation, we'd say, let's look at who you are right now. And my sense of this is that you might not think you're a digital mortgage company. A lot of people I talk to think, I'm not a digital mortgage company because I don't do my loans completely automated. And the truth be told is, nobody really does a loan where it's end-to-end automated, except for maybe Rocket. That's the only company I can think of that can do that. But this is an example that you see on the screen right now of an exhibit that I put together for a case study that I did at Harvard. And this piece was really focused on whether or not the digital mortgage itself was going to help or hinder professionals in the business. Are you going to be replaced, or is this really a tool that's going to be something that can accelerate and scale your business. And I won't give you the punchline to that. If you're interested in reading that, it's on our website. You can go take a look at it. But what I wanted to share with you here today is that you are a digital company, even if you didn't think so coming in today, if you use any of the following systems: an online LOS or a electronic LOS that holds your data for your loans, and probably you're using an electronic or a piece of software accounting system like AMB or Loan Vision or QuickBooks or something along the lines of that matter. So you can see the evolution of this over time. Since 1989, these systems were being generated. And where we are today is everybody is using, to some degree, some electronic version of stored data. So I think we can all agree that you are a digital company. You do have the capability of automating reports. And going back to this, how do we approach it and what would we do? The way that we look at it, and the system that we've developed, is called Telemetry BI. It's an option for people in the mortgage industry to automate the reports, and we'll get to that maybe a little bit later in the discussion. But what we want to show you here is a simple rendering of how you might think about where the data comes from, what you would do to extract it, where does it reside, and then what do you do to render it. And while this might look like an oversimplification of a process, it pretty much is the end-to-end piece of how you might take data and then render it where you can get to it at any point of the day, updated at high frequencies, etc. And this is a visualization of the way that our system is mapped out. So the accounting system that we talked about could be AMB or Loan Vision or QuickBooks, and you've got your loan origination systems, the LOS, which you might be using Encompass, or you might be using Fiserv, you might be using Calex, you might be using a LendingQB, something like that. All those things can be connected up to a database that then you can start to think about how to render these reports in automated fashion. So the question that we always begin with the customer, and this is our recommendation, is looking at your data, which doesn't really cost you much. It's really probably a good exercise for all of you to go through anyway. Look at the data and just do an inventory and see if you have some idea about the data that you're collecting, whether it's valuable that you need, if it's something you don't need. Maybe there's some legacy items in there that you've been collecting you no longer need. That's kind of like doing some housekeeping, doing your spring cleaning, cleaning out your garage. But what we want to look at is we want to look at areas in here where we might have redundancy that could cause some, disconnect or cause things to be out of sync, where you have different types of data that there's no data integrity around it. So the data that's inside that field is not necessarily usable. And let me give you some examples here. What you can see on the screen right now are basically some things that could harm your company by not having nice, clean data. And one thing that you'll understand as you start doing this is that the data that you put in is the most important piece, because if you have data integrity, when you get to the reporting part, it's going to give you a lot more confidence around the outcomes of what you're trying to predict. And it also will give your team a lot more confidence in looking at those numbers and trusting in your systems. So a couple examples. These are a couple of my favorite ones. In fact, we had a client who basically said, hey, I want to know what the workload is for all my processors. I want to see all the loans that they have in the pipeline. I want to be able to tell if they're, getting them done within the turn times that I expect. If they're late, why are they late? All those things. And our system can do that, as others. And we looked at their data, and the first thing we realized is they weren't assigning the processors in the LOS to the file until after the loan was being underwritten. So they had no idea who was working on that data or those loan files while it was going up to the point of loan approval or denial. And so we couldn't do it until they went back and worked on the data input. So something as simple as a process can solve for that data point. A good example of an accounting GL problem is we have another client who, when we reviewed the account software, we looked at the GL and we noticed that on the main level of the root of the GL ledgers, they had accounts that were specific to branches. Now, a lot of you may have branches in your business, and one of the big challenges that our clients have had in the past is trying to keep up with branch reporting. We know that can be an exponential nightmare. So the structure inside the accounting package typically is you create a GL and it has a sub account which denotes the branch code. So in this particular case, they had GLs that had the branch name and they had a sub account with the branch code. When they tried to condense all that data down, the most discrete we could get it was all the GLs that had all the branch breakouts in them. We could never consolidate it to one number. So it doesn't sound like a big major problem, and it's not, but it was enough of a headache where we had to kind of parse that out and go, here's a solution to get that done so you can get to the next level and really start working with the raw data the way it's supposed to be. And a challenge with that is correlating the loan agents and the branch in both the LOS and financial package so they synced up properly. So there's a couple examples about looking at your data, taking a sort of just a reasonable, common sense approach to why you're collecting it, what you're doing with it, and is the type of data that's in that field, is that actually what you expect? So I would highly recommend that you do that. Otherwise, you're going to end up like this poor guy over here, where Bob has created from the same set of data 3 reports that say 3 different things. And I think, Ron, we probably know what happens next is everybody loses trust in the system.
Absolutely. And this happens more often than you can imagine. And it really does subvert trust in your reporting system when a particular metric purports to measure one thing and you wind up getting multiple versions that may actually conflict with one another.
So the next thing is cost benefit. And this is something that you'll have to think about before you eliminate your reporting. And again, we want to stress that one of the things that we're really good at is helping you understand where those benefits are, so that if you're doing some kind of cost benefit analysis and you want some help with that, just give us a call. We'd be happy to share some ideas with you. But fairly common sense approach that we take. We try to look at the amount of time and the staff costs and things of that nature for creating these monthly reports. And you shouldn't think about it like, a lot of people look at automation, they think, oh my God, you're taking my job away from me. We're not taking anybody's job away. We're giving you time back. So you can do really valuable things with those smart and creative people that work for you, as opposed to have them working on redundant processes that are just, mind-numbing and error-prone, to no fault of their own. It's just the nature of the beast. So some of the things that you're going to say, and I just want to point this out really quick, is if you've got branch managers, and we've all experienced this, everyone's competing to hire branches, bring in LOs, do all these things. One of the benefits that I found when retaining a branch relationship, the manager and the people that work in there, is having transparency around the information, especially around their performance. And if you're giving that information late, and if there's any question around it, it just generates a lot of mistrust. It also creates a lot of pressure on the accounting department, because they're typically going back to that 1,000 email a day approach. I give you an aggregate number, you don't trust the number, so you're going to email or call me and say, prove it. And now we get into this paper chase of sending invoices, looking at detail. In a digital format, you typically have the ability to drill into those aggregate numbers so that the branch manager can investigate those questions without calling the accounting staff. And the second part of that is gain some trust. It's a really important factor in this, because if we can impart trust on the users as a business, then they can rely on it, number one, but number two, they feel better about their own performance related to the things that you're measuring in the business. So looking at this from a standpoint of your highly skilled personnel, they're downloading, they're cutting and pasting, they're distributing these redundant reports. I think you probably want to take these 3 people out of the equation of doing that type of work. An automated system using software as a service can provide, predictable cost without any interruption. And it should be, as everyone always touts, a 99.99% uptime, and it also is available 24/7. So unlike the human element, and people need to go home and relax and not work all weekend and do those sorts of things, it really does create a better environment for everybody, for the people who need the information, and for the people that are producing the information. I know, Ron, you've got a story about that, about your own wife working on the weekends, on call.
Oh my gosh, it's my wife is an FP&A. She's not in the mortgage business, but she's constantly getting emails or phone calls on a Friday afternoon from somebody in the C-suite indicating that they need a report by Monday for an emergency budget meeting or for a meeting with shareholders. And she winds up spending her weekend working on these spreadsheets. And again, if somebody's collaborating and they wind up changing a value in a cell without letting her know, her numbers are suddenly different. And it winds up being very stressful for her. And that's something that we've heard from all of our clients. One of my favorites, one of the most common, at least from our accountants that we work with, is before they started using telemetry, they were spending untold hours researching the data behind the reports they had previously produced to verify that they were correct from the branch manager or from the LO for that matter. So even if they were correct, they were still spending a number of hours going through and researching their numbers and validating it. And so if you can save your accountants that much time, they can focus on the things that are really within their domain and most beneficial to your enterprise.
So bringing this back to the automation, you can see this little bot here on the side here, this telemetry bot. The nice thing about the telemetry bot is once you program it to do what it needs to do, it just goes about its busy work, doing its thing, and provides you with everything that you're looking for 24/7. You can access it anywhere you can get to an internet with a smart device, whether it's your phone. Probably best to use a tablet. That's a good device that I use every day to access a system like this. Certainly your computers, but if you're traveling, you can get to it. It's interesting. Some of our clients, especially through COVID, a lot of people are working from home. The people that use our system, they didn't lose a beat because they could get the information. It's on the computer. They can share it easily. And even at the C-level, we've got CEOs that are now working one day from the house and don't feel like they're missing out on anything because they have access to all the important data. So the last thing I'd add to this, and Ron and I have seen this many, many times, is the temptation to do this yourself. And in some cases, you probably could do some simplified version of these yourself, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But to do something that's comprehensive can be very costly because you need to have the right team of people to do it. So just to give you some idea, if you're thinking about doing it, you haven't delved into it, a cautionary tale, you'd need, at very minimum, 2 people. You'd need a domain expert, somebody who really gets 100% of the mortgage space, not just one silo of discipline. Number 2, you'd need a really good data scientist who has not only the expertise around how to use the data, but how to operate in the confines of the technical piece of that as well. Maybe even a web designer if you're trying to do your own application. Our experience is that something like this from an R&D perspective would cost you have to budget at least $300,000 a year to do it. And it could take you more than a year, maybe more like 2 years to really get a fairly refined product, which is why we don't recommend you do it yourself. Whether you use us or anybody for that matter, there's a lot of great solutions that you can find in the marketplace that can solve these problems for you. Remember the idea here, get rid of the manual reporting, give that time back to your personnel, and get out of that routine of reports being late. You can't use them because the data is so old, it's not even relevant anymore. Get into the automated space and do it in a way where you're solving the problems that you need to solve first. So any solution that you can think of, you can research those online. Some of them will require you to actually program it. I would not recommend that you get into programming your own system only because you're going to get frustrated. And let's talk to you a little bit about how we approach solving these problems for you. Because again, we know these problems exist, and this is really the genesis of developing telemetry, was coming up with a standardized approach to produce the top 100 KPIs, metrics, and reports that are basically dictated by other experts in the mortgage industry, not just our vision. People that like Garrett McCauley, people like Lewis Stratford. Obviously, the MBA has a stake in defining what they think the mortgage companies should be measuring, and your auditors and your compliance and your warehouse lenders, for example, that want to do an internal audit to make sure you're still a good candidate for working with them. All of these partners that you have in the business are telling you, here's the best practice. And what we've tried to do is codify that in one system that doesn't require any programming, that allows you access, like 24/7, anything that you need, it's there and it's updating frequently, almost in real time. So the other thing to think about with the difference between us and other systems in the marketplace is we actually collect both the LOS data, the operational metrics, as well as the financial metrics. And that's a big distinction that's different. So when you're out there looking, make sure you understand what your needs are. And if you need financial data as well, you should look at something that can do both. There are systems out there like NetSuite that can do that, but those are extremely expensive and they're not made for mortgage. So you might find that you're going to have a huge implementation fee. And another pitch for telemetry is that we don't charge implementation fees, and we already have a system that's designed for mortgage, so there's no implementation time really. It's just basically picking from a list all the things that you want to see, and at that point we know how to implement it, and we can do that very quickly. So it's important for you to understand what the problems are that you're trying to solve and what the priority is when you're making these decisions, so that you can make the right decision. So again, we entered this space because we solve these problems that we discussed today by automating these reports and using the data that you're already collecting. This is not something that you need to go out and figure out how to collect. Taking the day-to-day data that you collect right now to run your business, we're capable of putting that in our system and rendering these top 100 to you. So, Ron, anything else you want to add to that today?
No, just that if you're interested in learning a little bit more about telemetry, feel free to reach out to us. I included some contact information in the chat as well, and we'd be happy to meet with you, discuss your needs, and go into some more detail on how we can help you out.
Sure, Tony, we'll turn it over to you. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer, or we can wrap up.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate this information that you've shared. Now is the time. If you do have a question, please feel free to type that into the chat. I have a question about the RPAs. So tell me a little bit, because that's like, the buzzword. So tell me a little bit about that and how, 5X Solutions could assist in that process.
Sure, that's great. So RPA basically is robotic process automation. And essentially, just to oversimplify it, it emulates the process that you would go through as a human in creating those manual reports. So if you have a really well-formed report that may require you to go into several different systems, export data, put it into a well-formed form, whether it's Excel or something like that, you can basically program that to do all those human-like tasks in an automated way, and then turn around and distribute that to whomever needs to receive it. It's a really good way to solve for a one-off complex report that nobody else in the world wants but that particular company, and so that might be a solution. It's something that we fall back on if we can't do something within telemetry. But RPA has become, I think it's fairly popular. That is an area where, again, if you're not a programmer, I would highly recommend you reach out to somebody who's an expert like Ron. I'm pointing out because he's above me on the screen. He does this all the time, and it works great for these one-off types of things. So think about that as a solution as well.
You know, one of the other advantages of RPA, especially as it relates to our telemetry BI platform, is that oftentimes high-level individuals in the organization may want to look at a report on a consistent basis and get it either emailed to them or sent via text, rather than having to log on to the platform. So that's another area that we've gotten really good feedback on, the integration of RPA with telemetry.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any questions. I just want to let our guests and attendees know that once again, there will be a follow-up email that comes out tomorrow. And I'm guessing we will be able to provide the deck for the folks. So that will be attached to your email that you receive, as well as a link to the YouTube recording. If you've missed any of the details that we've provided, because you guys did go into some pretty specific details about the reporting, especially that KPI, then you guys can take a look at that. And Ron and John's information is here if you want to reach out to them directly. And I just want to thank you guys again. You know, it's such a pleasure to work with you. I love my job because I get to work with the brightest and the best minds. And so I just appreciate your partnership and your willingness to share your expertise with TMC Connect.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.